welcome back to Here Be Dungeons and Dragons. I am your host, as always, Stephen Stark, and joining me this week, we're very honored to have two brand new guests come to the channel. We've got Aemy of the Eerie and John Mincer.
Hello.
And I'll let them tell you who they are, as much about themselves as they want. Ladies first. Aemy, introduce yourself and let the people know who you are. And if you want to throw in some D&D cred, you can do that, of course.
Certainly. Hi, Aemy of the Eerie. I am recent part-time co-host of the Isle of Faces podcast, Song of Ice and Fire podcast. And regarding D&D, I've been playing for 8-9 years now. Started with 3.5, migrated over to 5th edition, which I quite enjoy. I've played a few other games as well. Run 2 big campaigns, lots of one-shots, have a ton of fun with it, and excited to talk D&D today.
Nice.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm John Mincer. I am lately the host of the Playing Rough podcast, a now defunct podcast on board gaming and tabletop gaming. We both myself and my co-host had to leave after we had children. But for D&D, I have been playing since I was about 8 years old, which makes it, I think, a full 20 years now. So a little longer. And I've been DMing for 15.
All right. Yeah. So some simple math leads me to believe I've been playing D&D longer than you've been alive. I played my first game when I was 9, and I'm 46 now. So is that 37 years?
All right. Got me beat by a few years of life. Yeah.
Pretty good. Yeah.
I'm not trying to flex or anything, but I'm one of the OGs. I lived through the Satanic Panic,
Yes.
Which, we'll touch on that to some degree too, because I lived it, I was a D&D nerd when being a D&D nerd was one of the worst things you could be. But, I persevered, got through, and the game is in a true resurgence. And it's in a true resurgence because those of us that love it continued to love it. Like I've gone stretches where I didn't have a game, but I never really was like, I'm not going to play anymore.
Yeah.
I never quit the hobby.
If I didn't have a game going, I'd go back to my books and reread them over and over and over.
Yeah. I think the longest break I've had since I started was like 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I took a couple of years off even, but I had kids too. And there was a time when, I'm assuming we all play virtually now.
Yeah.
Which has actually been a huge help. All of my games are virtual. I haven't sat around a table and rolled dice in a few years now.
We had a game going right when the pandemic broke out where for a few weeks we persevered and we met at the GM's house, and then we realized this isn't going to work anymore, and so that switched to digital.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I've played one game in person since then, and it was like a family game.
Right.
And it was wild because it was about 6 months into the pandemic, so it already felt kind of strange to go back to that. But
right.
Yeah.
And Laura raises a good point. It's having, I am contributing to this resurgence personally. So we have a Slack group, which a lot of the regulars from the chat are in our Slack group. And that's where we organize our D&D games. I have 2 full parties of characters that are just that I have converted myself.
That's awesome.
And I'm very proud of that fact, but I don't really have an outline or anything for what to talk about. But this game it's a big game, and there's a lot of things that people don't always understand, especially people who have never played or who are newer players. So if you guys can think back, you've both played for quite some time now.
Yeah.
But you were a new player. And Aemy, I actually want to get yours specifically. So if you said you started playing about 10 years ago, that's after the rise of nerdy culture, but before D&D saw its true resurgence?
Yeah, I mean, I started playing in my mid-20s, but I wanted to play in college. Like I've been a nerd for a long time. Way back in high school, I was like play by post forums and stuff like that. And so D&D was kind of always on the horizon for me. It was inevitable in my life. But eventually we finally got a group together. We were actually at a friend's going away party and lamenting that we never got to play with him. And we were like, let's form a party right here. All the people who are saying this. And it took off from there. And we played 3-5 because that was what 2 of the people who had played before were familiar with. And played for 6 years in that campaign, took it all the way to, I think my combined level was like 36.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was wild. Prestige classes, all of that. But yeah, I don't know. Back when I started, I think like the biggest thing someone should have told me is like you can't do D&D wrong. I mean, you can't, you know, I guess the best way to put it is like, don't freak out that you're doing every little thing wrong. Like the DM,
Right.
the other players at the table, they're there to help you. And like everyone's been new before. So, you know, I would get paralyzed on my turn. Like, oh my God, I have to do the perfect combination of everything. And it's like, sometimes like you have to remember that turn is 6 seconds. Just do something, get it done, learn from it. Those spell slots will be there later.
Right. My number one rule has always been, if you're having fun, you're doing it right.
Exactly.
The experience I had with doing it wrong, I suppose, is my first game. I was invited to a neighborhood game with just people from around my neighborhood, and I was young. I was 8, and I didn't play again really until I was in high school. And by that time, I had gotten a first edition player's handbook from like original Dungeons and Dragons.
Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, exactly. And that book does not explain how tabletop gaming works. Not really. You kind of have to know and have like an apprentice. You know, you're an apprentice wizard, and someone is teaching you what to do and how to do it. And you know, nowadays there's this trend toward writing a paragraph or a chapter at the beginning of every book that says, here's how you do a tabletop game. But I didn't know. And so we just kind of winged it.
Well, and that's okay too. Like I was 9, which means that his name is Patrick, my first dungeon master, still a friend of mine. He was probably 13 at the time. And he had played before, but like, how good of a dungeon master is a 13-year-old? You know, we weren't going to win any awards for creativity, but we had fun, and it led us on and on and on. And like, so I've been dungeon mastering since I was a teenager as well. And you both have done it quite a bit also. So would you agree that literally every dungeon master is different?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Because I can have really great sessions that are 3 or 4 hours long, and nobody ever rolls an initiative roll or an attack roll, just because there's juicy story threads being chewed on, and there are, now maybe you're rolling perception or investigation or, you know, any of those skill checks to figure out what's going on, but sometimes there's just no fight because the better part of the story isn't the action at that point. Do you ever find yourself doing that? Yeah.
I think my current party is probably not been in combat for 2-3 sessions because they're investigating something major, and they're trying to be under the radar. They're trying to, get things aligned. And
I've played 2 one-shots where I think between the 2 of them there was 1 round of combat. So pretty wild. Yeah.
But the other side of that coin is fighting monsters and killing things is fun. It's exciting.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, Peter. Yeah. My mistake.
That's Potter. He plays in one of my games, and he is our pet Irish troll. He is going to troll all of us mercilessly the entire time.
I like it.
He's a lovely person. He really is. But that's the only time I will actually say that. The rest of the time, I'm just going to troll him back.
We have a chaotic neutral bard in the chat. It's great.
You know what? That's very apt.
I like it.
But he's talking about going back and playing like red box Dungeons and Dragons from 1983 or whatever it is. He wants to run a session of that, and I mean, I'm down. Give me a dwarf, slap some plate mail on me, let's go.
The closest I've gotten to that is I have Tales of the Yawning Portal, and so I just concluded a run through Forge of Fury yesterday with some friends on the Radio Westeros Discord server, and that was a blast. But that also has Tomb of Horrors in it and some other like really old like D&D, AD&D adventures in it, but like retooled for 5th edition. So that's my comfort zone as a DM is 5e, but I like that I can kind of go back and still experience some of the content from the earlier eras.
I'm a 3.5 and 5e as well, but I'm really excited that the OSR is happening as well, the old school renaissance, that even if you can't play D&D, there are other systems out there that are recreating that early D&D experience.
Totally.
Right. Now there's some talk about THACO going on. Are either of you, like, I'm sure you know of it, but did you ever play with THACO?
I am a THACO original. Yes, I had to learn the calculation in order to play.
Right.
No, I'm not familiar.
Well, it's the old THACO is to hit armor class 0. So armor classes used to start at 10 and then go down to get better.
Ah, okay.
So the THACO was the number you needed to roll to hit 0, which is basically the same number you'd need to roll to hit a 20.
All right.
System. But I don't know why they did it upside down like that, but they did.
Interesting.
Which meant that there was a calculation every time you rolled. It wasn't a matter of checking against your own page. It was you had to check against their page too.
Oh boy.
Right. Right.
I'm not into D&D for the math. I'm not gonna lie. That's not what I'm here for.
Okay.
Well, that's a really good question, right? Is simulationist versus narrativist? I'm a narrative person all the way for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about
I
you,
love
Steve?
combat, but
so my favorite thing to do is to if the characters are talking to each other, that's actually my favorite thing. Now, as a dungeon master, obviously it requires a lot of work for me to try to set that up, to create a situation where they are talking. Hold on, we're going to add somebody real quick.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Are you wearing Seahawks gear?
Of course I am.
I'm going to have to remove you again.
Oh. What, it's corporate?
No. No, you're good, buddy. You're good. I'm just messing.
Okay, I don't know if there are rules against that on YouTube.
No.
Okay.
You're fine. I'm just a troll sometimes myself.
All right.
You're in dangerous waters, that's all.
So, everybody, this is Patrick. He plays. This is not the Patrick I mentioned earlier. It's a different guy named Patrick, who was my first dungeon master. This is Patrick.
There's another Patrick?
Well, there's another Patrick that I know, yes.
There's at least one other Patrick.
There's at least one other Patrick.
Steven, I'm shocked.
There's at least one other Steven. I've met him.
We have like 5 Johns in the chat alone right now.
I know, right? But yeah, so Patrick, thanks for joining us. I know you just got off work and got here as quick as you could. So I'm going to give everybody a chance to get to know you. Why don't you just introduce yourself? And if you have a podcast or anything like that, you can plug it. Okay. I don't think you do.
Yeah, my name is Patrick. I'm not a content creator. I have nothing to look up. I just enjoy playing D&D with Steven.
And we've played together for 2.5 or 3 years now.
Yeah, probably 3 years by now.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think my 2.5 niece was born yet when.
No, she wasn't. So. She was not. She's grown up the entire time with our adventuring crew. But Patrick, so I did a D&D stream over 2 years ago, but it was before I officially launched my channel, and it was the quality of it was very poor. So you can't find it. I'm just going to put it that way. It doesn't exist anymore. But you were on that, Patrick.
Yeah, I'm like when they recast an old actor when they reboot a movie. Bring me as a cameo for the old fans.
Right, for the OGs that remember. Okay, but yeah, okay. So, but John and Patrick and myself, we actually all play in a game together right now. And I don't want to throw any shade on anybody else I've played with, but this is a really great crew that we have. Like, it's all people who have dungeon mastered before, except for the guy who's currently dungeon mastering.
And good for him, though. We were able to, Steve, create one of those moments you were just mentioning where the PCs were able to talk to each other and not only talk about our knowledge of the lore, but also our characters' interpretation of the lore and where we stood with regard to each other and each other's beliefs. And it was a really fun RP session like I've not really had in a long time.
Yeah, that's what I loved about it. And that's what I mean as a dungeon master. My favorite thing is when I can get two players talking to each other like that, where they're so invested and they know the world, they know the character, they know their character's mindset and their stances on things. And like we were having a theological debate in our game. And it was awesome. And, you know, maybe it went on a little longer than some of the other players wanted, but I don't think it was maybe more than 5 minutes. Right.
Well worth it to flesh out how our characters stand in relation to each other and the world they live in.
I would like to answer this question. I do not stream my games. Well, I actually do stream Baldur's Gate 3, which is a Dungeons and Dragons video game on my channel on Thursday nights. But I don't stream my tabletop because that is time for me to be off and relaxed and not in host mode. You know what I mean?
Yeah, playing for a stream is a lot different than playing with a group of friends, because on a stream you're putting on a performance for an audience, whereas with your friends it's just you hanging out.
Right. Yeah. And you know, like, here's the thing: you want to watch somebody who's great at it, go watch Critical Role. You know, like they've got it.
Well, and even them, like you say, you know, they just announced that their campaign 2 is coming to a close pretty soon, and like fans melted down because they didn't agree. And I don't want to bring that into my game. Like, if I want to make a choice about the narrative, I don't need, you know, a lot of feedback on that other than what's happening at the table. You know, of course, your relationship with your players is important, and you want to bring that into account when you're making choices. But
one of the things that we used to do when I was playing rough is that my co-host and I would record our sessions, and then we would go through and we would cut together a clip of the narrative, I guess you'd say. We'd cut out some of the rolling, some of the dithering about rules and everything like that, and ultimately release usually about 3 hours of content over the course of a couple of nights. And it was fun, but it allowed us a little bit more control over what we actually put out there as well, because of the exact same reasons y'all are talking about. And also just that sometimes we wanted to make sure we played nice with the IP. We got special permission one time to play in the Fallen London universe from the company. And we could only air the first of our games to kind of, you know, get people interested in hearing about the world, but not reveal any of their big secrets, which was one of the things that they as a company were selling. So it was a lot of fun, really cool, but we also had to make sure that we were careful with their IP.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, those are all things that go into why I don't do it live, because you will also notice that all of my content is in the live stream format, which is click go live, talk for a couple hours, click in stream, and don't edit anything. Like, once it's done, it's done. You know, the most I have to do is edit together a thumbnail. So, I mean, I understand the desire to want to watch people play, but there are so many great people doing it already, and they're doing it on a professional level, so they get to spend their workday preparing for Dungeons and Dragons. I don't get to do that. So by all means, go try out a couple of them and see what tickles your fancy. But nothing is ever going to compare to the experience of playing the game yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go around and ask each of you to talk about those early experiences. I know you were 9 or were in high school, but what was that first game like? Patrick, you've been here the least, so I'm going to ask you first. What was your first adventure into D&D? What was your character? Do you even remember?
The first time I ever played D&D, I was 10 years old. My friend Aaron Anderson had got a box starter set, and my first character was a halfling rogue. Could not tell you what his name was. We didn't play for very long. We explored a dungeon, ran into a water elemental, recess ran out. I don't think we ever played that game again. Later on, I played a cleric. And again, recess ran out before anything exciting happened. But then that was kind of the last I played D&D for a while. Then when I was 14, my parents got me the 3.5 starter set on a box, and I played that for a long time. And and these days, I've been running a 3.5 campaign for about 2 years with a group of friends I met on Twitter. This is apart from the game I play with Steven and John.
Yeah, that game came about because I was wanting to play. I didn't know anybody locally who played. I had been out of the hobby. Again, as I said, I hadn't played for a few years, but I was like, no, I need to get back in it. I just miss it. And I just tweeted, who wants to play D&D? And Patrick was one of those that responded. So was Kurt, who's been on my channel way back when. So was, now Kurt brought along William, and William eventually brought along John.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because John joined when the other guy had to leave because he had a kid.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was the same way. Just tweeted, who wants to play Dungeons and Dragons? I want to play. I'll be the dungeon master. I'll run a campaign for at least a year, and then somebody else can run, and I can have a break. Which, by the way, I really want to go back to that campaign, Patrick. We didn't leave it in the best spot.
I'm really looking forward to being that character again. He's of all the characters I played, he's not the most fun character I played. That was Cassandra, but he's my favorite of them.
I could see that. Yeah. So what about Emily? Emily, do you remember your first character?
Oh yeah, because I played her for a very long time. That was the 6-year campaign that I mentioned.
Okay.
We actually started at level 5 because my 2 friends who had played before were like, oh, you don't want to play when you could die by a wolf killing you. And then that character who said that, who was playing a weird 3/5 class called Chronomancer, died being killed by a wolf in the first session. Sorry, Joe, for calling you out.
It'd be like that sometimes.
Yeah, it does, and it was kind of great. It was took the edge off a little bit of how serious I was taking the game as my very first time. But I rolled up a very, very edgy half-drow rogue who was playing with a party of neutral to evil folk who kind of got roped into doing something for the for their own personal interests because they didn't care about saving the world at the time. And over time, a few of the players dropped out. The 2 most evil ones ended up not really actually fitting. I think the rest of us were we kind of want a redemption story and schedules, all that. But I think 4 of us total made it to the end, and we all kind of redeemed ourselves. It was wonderful. I ended up taking a bunch of levels in Wizard as well, so really buffed that intelligence score and kind of became the group mom. I think my alignment shifted from chaotic to lawful over time because I was the only adult in the room for quite a while. But it was such a good time. We went from being killed by a wolf to killing a god and saving the world. So
yeah, Jess says her current character. Her first character is her current character. What she's not telling you is that's because this morning was the first time she ever played. She played with us on Ruby team this morning, and it was her, her first ever foray into Dungeons and Dragons. But she did great She's playing a necromancer, and it's fun.
Ooh, that's awesome.
Congrats, Jess. One of today's 10,000.
Right? Is it 10,000 people a day?
Learn something that, it's new, I think. Yeah. I have a good wolf story as well, actually. In my first campaign ever, it wasn't my character. It was my friend's character was playing a paladin who lost his paladin powers after intentionally going into the woods and stalking a wolf to kill. And the GM was like, that's not very paladin of you. And ended up having to do a redemption arc for slaughtering a wolf in cold blood.
Well, the very first session of my campaign, I threw a bunch of goblins riding wolves at the heroes and knocked all of them out.
Oops.
TPK.
Well, they survived. I had them wake up in the infirmary, but yeah, it was a rough fight.
Yeah.
So my first character, I was 8 years old, and I was being looked after by an older person an older boy in the neighborhood who had accidentally scheduled his babysitting over his D&D game. And so I was invited to play with him and his friends, and I rolled up a human rogue. I was in a tavern fight. I don't know if he was playing a module or if he was just homebrewing a campaign. I helped out. I was sent home to my parents, and I don't think I ever saw him again. His family moved a few weeks later. So it did take a while before I finally got back to D&D, but it was a really good, almost like magical first experience, despite the very basicness of the setup.
So did I hear that right, that all three of our first characters were rogues?
I think so.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Oh man, my first character that I ever
rogues
played
are awesome. That's why.
Was a dwarf. Not a dwarf fighter, or no, he was a dwarf. If you go back to the old red box original Dungeons and Dragons, dwarf was a class. Elf was a class.
That's funny.
It was
hard to imagine.
A fighter with a couple of tweaks, but like all dwarves were the same, all elves were the same, all halflings were the same. Then you had the classic fighter, magic user, cleric, and thief. But
No
yeah, I was a
illusionist?
dwarf, and I wore plate mail armor, and I liked knocking the heads off of orcs. That was really fun for 9-year-old me.
Was Gnome Illusionist in that first one, or was that late?
Oh, no. The
Yeah.
classes were fighter, magic user, thief, cleric, dwarf, halfling, elf.
Good.
That's it. And the alignments were evil, good, neutral, evil, and good.
Was this after the Tolkien estate made them stop using the word hobbit?
Yes, but before there was an advanced, it was concurrent with advanced Dungeons and Dragons because of the weird split between Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax having different ownership of different parts of it. But anyway, way back, if you just Google basic Dungeons and Dragons and you find a red box with a dragon on it and a guy in a horned helm, that's the one I played, and dwarf was it. We basically played baseball with orc heads.
Hey, that's fun.
But 9-year-old boys be like that sometimes.
It's true.
But and as fun as those early characters are, and as you say, your first character is very forgettable. I don't remember. Well, maybe not for you, Emily. You played her I'm assuming her.
Yeah.
For a long time. I did not play that character that I played for a long time, although I have played characters for years before, many years.
Mm-hmm.
So the basic game, it was a great or the early game is a great vehicle to get people interested, but that's not what keeps us coming back. Knocking the heads off of orcs gets old after a little while. And 30 odd years later, I still play in multiple games. I'm not sure I can articulate all of why that is, but I'm going to try to articulate at least some of it. And I'm sure you all have similar experience as well. The way you interact with the game has evolved over your time spent with it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think I didn't, when I started playing, I didn't even really know what the game could be, and going through that very long campaign with friends, that informed so much about what I thought D&D was. It wasn't until years in that I, found Critical Role and tried out other podcasts. So, like, I got into Harmon Quest for a little while, and also started to try to make my own game. And I think like about the first session I ran as a DM and how I was like, I'm going to homebrew everything, and just like very quickly was like, this was a mistake. And I got through it. I wanted to throw like this festival one shot for my friend's birthday with a mystery in it. They had fun still, but the next thing that I ran was a pre-written one shot, and to see kind of how someone else formatted a campaign really informed my own organizational skills and helped me figure out how to structure story and know what you can plan and what you have to just let happen and then react to in the moment, because I think that's such a big part of it.
Eberron was a really transformative supplement for me, seeing that you can tell different stories than traditional heroic swords and sorcery kind of things. You can tell noir stories, you can tell mystery stories, you can tell adventure stories, and Indiana Jones stories and things like that.
I will say that with the asterisk that you do have to understand the system you're playing in. Now, we are specifically talking about Dungeons and Dragons. That's what we're all playing right now. But Dungeons and Dragons is a very specific, like, the character you are playing is going to be superhuman before long.
Yeah.
At some point, you will get beyond the abilities of anybody who is alive in the world that we live in today. I often make the argument that nobody on Earth is over 4th level.
Right. And so even in Eberron, where they specifically try to keep people under 12 or so, there are still superhumans for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But also, just like you said, Emily, seeing how they were structured, seeing how the adventures were structured, and being able to learn how to piece an adventure together that people would have fun doing, that was really important.
Yeah, and I mean, I use my 2 big campaigns that I run are actually both totally homebrew world. They're both in the same world, because why would I want to do that again? Just keep building up the same thing. But I was able to kind of figure out, like, through that, here's what I need to have, and here's you don't write one story and push people down that path. You create things going on all over the place and let them stumble upon it, and a story will develop over time. I mean, the first big arc of the campaign I'm running right now came from like a throwaway comment my NPC had that the party latched onto, and it became a deep conspiracy underground with this bandit ring who was pressuring the cleric's friends in town, and turned into like a 3-month thing in real life, all because I made one throwaway comment that they really latched onto.
But like, is that not a beautiful part of
it is
that you hadn't planned on it, but they said, no, this is where the story's going, and you went there with them, and you all made that a thing together. That is the cooperative storytelling experience that we're all looking for.
I mean, if I wanted to just tell my story, I wouldn't play D&D. I would be a writer, but I don't enjoy that nearly as much as making a story with my friends.
Right on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm reading on the chat real quick.
Yeah.
Cam is just saying Cam has been a long time player too. I know. So, and you know what? I'm going to throw this up. I know AJ is asking Kelly, Jaded Redhead specifically, but this is a great question, I think, because how much does alignment affect your group? Like, not at all to extremely a lot. Like, it really does depend. Also, how extreme are the differences?
Well, can I say something?
Of course.
All right. I think a lot of people have a problem with alignment because I think they see alignment as prescriptive rather than descriptive. Whereas people they choose their alignment before they know what their character's personality is, and they think, oh, I'm lawful good, I have to act in a lawful good way. They don't say, this is how my character acts, which alignment best describes that.
Mm-hmm. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, I can describe I always do describe myself as chaotic good. I think that is Steven's alignment. But like, does that mean that I'm always choosing the chaotic good option in every single instance of my life? Yeah. No, honestly, because a lot of times the neutral option is just as good and probably more efficient.
Yeah. And your characters are still like they're not bound to a line. They're not like beings from the outer planes like angels who are inherently lawful good and have to act lawful good because that's how they're created. They're human, asterisk, all that elves, dwarf, whatever, human beings who full of multitudes, just like any real person is.
Right. And there have been mechanical consequences for these philosophies throughout some of the editions, right? Like whether or not protection from good works on good characters. Normally it doesn't because they're not from good planes, but sometimes it does.
But I also think that Wizards of the Coast has done a good thing in minimizing the effect that alignment has from a game mechanics standpoint.
Yeah, I'm very much of the belief that alignment should impact the story quite a bit, but it should not mechanically penalize you or help someone. I think it's fun to see people explore and play with alignment. I mean, my chaotic neutral rogue, I said, shifted practically all the way to lawful, and part of that is because I'm not very chaotic, and I thought I was going to have fun playing that kind of a character, and then when I realized every single other person in this party is chaotic and they're off the wall, and I someone has to rein them in and actually like focus on a goal here. I kind of realized, maybe chaotic isn't right for Veer anymore. Maybe she is growing as a person and developing leadership skills, and some of that involves being a little bit less chaotic and a little bit more reliable. And
yeah, sorry. I thought you were winding up.
I'm done.
Okay. Yeah, my Elven Ranger in Steve's campaign, he's chaotic good. I mean, he's chaotic neutral. I definitely play him as very chaotic neutral, but how that has changed a lot. I mean, the way I started with him, he was just kind of the stereotypical edgelord loner of the group who didn't talk much and stands in the corner, and that was because I was intimidated by the prospect of role playing. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to improvise lines, so I'm just not going to talk if I don't have to. But as he grew, he goes from being this. I think it works for his character too, as he grows. Because his very first mission, he tried to assassinate the main bad guy all by himself, just with everybody else standing around. He tries to cut his way into the tent, just kill him in his sleep. Doesn't work. He gets the crap beaten out of him, and now he's a real team player, but only with his team. If you're not on his team, he ain't on your side. His whole deal is if you earn his trust, he will die for you. If everybody else,
but he doesn't trust anybody.
Yeah, the entire rest of the world gets the middle finger.
But it was a really great thing because we played that game for a year and a half before we sort of like stopped and moved on to Saltmarsh. And in that year and a half, I did watch your character go from, like you say, that loner edgelord, like, don't talk to me, to like caring deeply about his companions. And it's an NPC sister, but that NPC sister was also like instrumental in part of that evolution. And which is kind of this game does something no other game does, and it lets you experience what it's like to live a different kind of life, and it lets you. Do you have brothers and sisters, Patrick?
I've got an older brother.
Okay, so you have something to draw on with that sibling love, but like, I've never been a woman one day in my life. I have friends who are men and women and every other gender you can describe. But I've only been a man. You know what I mean? But many of my characters have been women. In our current game, I am playing a literally gender fluid character, which is not something I can experience in my own life. But, you know, this game lets you do that.
Yeah.
And for those of us who enjoy theatrics, you know, drama club or what have you, like, it's one thing to want to be cast in a role, but it's another thing to, like, you're never going to cast Danny DeVito in the Michael Jordan movie to play Michael Jordan. You know, it's just, there are limitations that exist on him.
I mean, he looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger too much.
They do look like twins.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the scariest things that ever happened to me as a DM was when a dear friend of mine, who is one of the most loyal people you could ever imagine, had been playing an evil character for a while and decided they wanted to betray the party. And that's always such a recipe for possible out-of-game disaster that I ended up having to work it out with the whole group for us to be like, okay, you know, are we okay with a major plot point coming up here in the next adventure? Something that could revolutionize everything. Are people ready to re-roll other characters? And everyone said yes, so we went ahead with it. And in a surprise, during the role-playing, another character sided with the traitor. And we ended up with an extremely well-matched battle between the good and evil sides. And I think good ended up winning, but just by a hair's breadth.
That's sweet.
It was great. It was really dangerous, but it was also a successful experiment, I guess you might say.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head of, like, you know, having that conversation out of character is really important. You know, on my games, I don't really like stop anything from happening as long as, you know, we've talked about it as a group. So, you know, in several of my games, like, my characters have romantic interests in either NPCs or each other, but, you know, we just have rules for, okay, like, you know, let's cut that off here. Nobody wants to hear about what you're doing in the bedroom. This is a PG-13 game, but, you know, like, I like well-rounded characters, and I think, you know, there's kind of a trope in D&D of, like, everyone in the adventuring party is just magically asexual, and it's great to have that representation. I'm not saying that, but I think, you know, it's cool to be able to explore all sorts of relationships, and whether that be with an NPC.
The bard collects all the horny from the rest of the party and shares it with them.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so true.
Yeah. My ranger actually ended up getting pretty horny as time went on.
You're right.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was really impressed, Patrick, with the last campaign you and I played together. You had a character that got married. It was not necessarily a romantic marriage, but it was an important plot point.
She cocked him on his wedding night.
Yeah, that's right.
and then had Steven's character murder him.
But did you get that sweet +2 AC from the ceremony spell, or?
I got pregnant with a demonic child.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was Ghost of Saltmarsh, and we were like, well, he was like a Dagon worshiper, for crying out loud.
Oh God, I just set a succubus on my party, and it was fantastic because they found her, and she's like this crying woman they thought was a prisoner, and believe it or not, it was the like chaotic neutral rogue played by a yoke boy of Radio Westeros, by the way, who was like, oh, poor girl, like, let me help you, and she turned on them so fast. She actually was able to turn one, and then when he broke free, a second one against the party, almost causing a party character death. A few of you in the chat were there for that, but yeah, man, sounds familiar.
So Steven, getting back to the sister you were talking about earlier, someone I want to commend you on as a dungeon master is this character was created. I mean, I sent Steven a message telling him this character exists basically as a plot device, because part of the story was going to be my character going back to where he came from, where his family is from, but he's like estranged from them. He doesn't like them, has no real reason to want to go back there. So create this plot device. Oh, there's this twin sister he has who's like the member of his family he actually likes, and she's the one who's going to try and bring him back. And when she comes back, she's like, so do you want to come back? And he's like, fuck no, I don't want to go back. Why the hell would I ever do that? And it's like, and this Steven gives me the plot hook, and he allows me to reject it because he trusts that when I think the time is right, I'm going to go down the plot he's created. I'm not trying to derail him. I'm trying to stay true to my character here.
And as a dungeon master, like, that's what I want the most. Like, okay, philosophy point, okay? I want every player to play the character they want to play. Second point is you should understand what game you're playing when you make that character, and you should make a character that fits. Like, the character that is constantly at odds with everybody else in the party gets old real fast. Like, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Kender from the Dragonlance setting of Dungeons and Dragons, but they are a player character race who subconsciously, compulsively steal things.
Ooh. It was the first D&D books that I ever read, the Dragonlance books.
Right,
so.
Now, the Kender that's in those stories is a great character in a novel. But when one of your party members keeps turning up with your crap and they don't even know why they have it, like, that gets real old for the party. So playing somebody who's always at odds, playing somebody who's always a naysayer, like, you can have a party of all good guys and one evil guy, as long as that evil guy is willing to play ball. For whatever reason, I'm laying low until I get my chance to chop off my hand and steal the hand of Vector.
I think that there's been a lot of ink spilled on this topic before, but it's important to remind everyone that evil characters usually have learned to navigate the world they live in. They're not just compulsively evil at every possible opportunity.
Yeah, anybody who just goes around stabbing everybody they meet is not going to be alive long enough to ever become a level 1 adventurer.
Right. You do have to learn how to be subtle.
Yeah, that was a problem in my first campaign where we had a few evil characters, and ultimately one of them left, one of them re-rolled and played a new character for a while, and then the other one, we had 3, went on a redemption arc because, our ultimate big bad guy was actually like not aligned with, he was a cleric, not aligned with his religion, and he wanted to kind of try something new. So, I think, the whole idea of like, that's what my character would do is like such a double-edged sword, because, I've had that happen in a game where my player had a wand of wish, our fighter did, and he's lawful good to the T, and they found a bunch of Yuan-Ti who had been transformed, and the only way to bring them back to their, human form, rather than being Yuan-Ti slaves forever, was a wish spell. And so even though they were only at level 8 and it was crazy to give away their last wish spell, it was what his character would do, and he saved 8 people, and it was amazing. But I think some of the other players were, or even other characters were like, really, like that could have been important later. But I applauded it. I fully encouraged it. I thought it was what his character would do. But sometimes what my character would do is I just want to be selfish or derail the game.
Opportunities for hard choices and opportunities for sacrifice help you set the tone for the game too. If you want everyone to be a murder hobo and everyone wants to be a murder hobo, you learn that very quickly when you give them a chance to save some orphans and they don't.
Yep.
Right. They're like, what do the orphans have in their pockets?
Yeah.
I mean, in Kurt's game, I'd say we were at least borderline murder hobo.
We were this close to murder hobo.
Yeah. That's the only reason we were murder hobos, is because we had a place to stay.
Yeah.
So we were like murder
tenants.
My character was an aristocratic murder hobo.
The murder landlord.
She manipulates other people to do her murders for her, because it wouldn't be ladylike for her to do it herself.
Yeah, that was a fun crew to play as, because my current character is not a good guy, but like not a bad guy either.
Mhm.
You know, their name is Tevrin, and they are, you know, they're neutral. Well, just on the good evil spectrum, they're neutral. My character before was definitely an evil character. Really only had 2 people in the whole world she cared about, and was only working for your character because your character was rich.
Yeah, neither of those 2 characters were in our party, by the way.
No, they weren't. They were NPCs. The only 2 people I cared about were NPCs.
I have a bias toward heroic characters. It was a little bit of a stretch for me to play a true mercenary who was just like, you know, deposit the money into my account and I keep fighting for you.
Yeah.
I love it, Emily. I love it. There's like there's the hierarchy for those of you.
Yeah, you know, ideally you get to murder Jet Setter around like tier 4 play, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a few minutes before we get to the midpoint. I do kind of want to circle back to something we were talking about before. We've had just fun riffing on different stuff, but like my appreciation for the game has truly changed over the years. And as you say, John, a lot have been ink is spilled on a lot of subjects about this. We've all talked people's ears off about this as we're teaching new people to play. Emily, you're running stuff over there on the History of Westeros Radio Westeros Discord. Hey, those are great people too. Love those guys too. I had Yoke Boy on my channel for an interview a couple months back. It was great. It was a lot of fun. But I'm sure some of those players were new, didn't really know what they were doing yet, and you had to bring them up to speed on what is a Dungeon and Dragon.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think I'm a new player whisperer, actually. I think I've never run anything with only veteran people, and I kind of like it that way.
Both are great. They really are.
I think I like having some veterans in the party. Like the Radio Westeros experience has been amazing because, you know, like this was Yoke Boy's first game actually, and a few other folks were either brand new or very, very new. But, you know, I have like Tana Ford in my group, our friend Craig, Sarah's been playing for a while, a few other folks in that game. Could kind of bring some experience to the table and help each other. And, you know, we had a few people who dove in and like were sending me, you know, 10-page backstories. And if you do that, I will pull that into the game. I will make your character so 3-dimensional and real.
I won't. Do not write me a 10-page backstory. Don't do it.
How about like 3 pages?
I mean, you can write 10 pages, but give me the 1-page, like, SparkNotes version.
It seems to me like so often, once the game really gets going and people are doing things in the game, a lot of backstory either changes or how the character ends up living is a little bit different than how they are described in the backstory.
Yeah, that happened to me when I was new too. I think, you know, I had a very rough idea and then she became something else. I think my most recent character, who I only made 3 or 4 months ago, like very, very true to her backstory. And I think she's young, so she'll grow and change in a while. But
yeah, my backstory was made up after we'd already started. I mean, my character's backstory was he's some guy who hangs out in the woods. And, you know, then he became an actual character, like, much later on.
Well, and the thing is, your backstory grew to be extremely interesting. And because you didn't write 10 pages of this is exactly what happened, it let me integrate that story into our larger narrative to where you're a pivotal character to the whole campaign in a way that some of the other player characters are not, just because it worked out that way as we continued to play. As I continue, you know, this is where my story was going, and this was your backstory, and we kept inching them closer together until, you know, they merged, I think, in a very satisfying way.
Yeah.
Like down to the, okay, you're an elf and your name is like Star That Brings the New Dawn. Well, there's like, we've had a lot of astronomy stuff tied up in it, and like, sun, moon, stars, symbolism is sprinkled throughout that campaign. And he just made the name up, but like we kept hammering away at it. And that's my problem with a 10-page backstory, and the reason that I actually don't like people to write them, because the coolest stuff about your character hasn't happened yet when you're writing that backstory. Now,
It's true.
Knowing the people you loved, knowing the best and worst moments of your life, knowing, do you like broccoli? That's all fine and good, but like, don't write this super impressive, I did this, I did that, because
that doesn't make sense when you're starting at level 1 or 2 anyway.
Right.
Yeah, my backstories, or I shouldn't even call them backstories necessarily, because what I typically do with my players is say, write me a couple paragraphs, but then I also give them like a questionnaire that helps walk them through stuff of, who are your family, and what do you think about the government of the place we live, and what is your deepest fear, and things like, and they don't have to give me that back. It's dangerous to give your DM a list of what your deepest fear is. I think one of my players was actually just like, LOL, no, not writing that. But helping frame that character, but like you said, still leaving some wiggle room. I think I've also noticed that the backstory lengths tend to be based on the race of the character I'm getting. So, if I'm a 20-year-old halfling, that's going to be a pretty short backstory. But if I'm a 140-year-old dwarf, well, you got some ground to cover there.
You also have to explain why you're so first level.
Like one of the players in my group, I had them all just give me a short backstory. His backstory is basically just he's playing a rogue. He's just like, I was in the army. I did some bad stuff in there, and then I deserted. And so I seized on that. I thought his character of all the other three, I thought his just had the most meat on it. So I've really worked his character into the plot harder than the others so far.
Mm-hmm.
So I invented like this evil sergeant he worked for. I invented this campaign he went on. I invented why he was in the army. He was like press ganged into it because he was caught as a criminal. He was like forced to commit war crimes, and now he's carrying he's carrying the guilt of all that on him now. And later on, this sergeant comes back as like this he's a retired soldier. He's working as like a mercenary for this religious fanatic, where this guy is just there because he loves killing and looting, and we're working for the state-appointed religion. It gives him an excuse to do that. But they just had like a fight where this guy confronts this. They confronted him, and he got to personally kill the sergeant who made him bad.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but also he died at one point. He got brought back to life a little bit later. But I had him experience the afterlife, and I had him go to the plane of Acheron, where he has to fight a pointless war forever as punishment for the things he did.
Mm-hmm. In the Blood War, a pointless war, the Blood Wars.
Well, it's not the Blood War. The Blood War is the war between the demons and the devils. Acheron is.
By the way, the demons would win if they would just like focus on it for a minute. They would totally wipe the devils out, but they're too busy killing each other.
Then they wouldn't be chaotic.
That wouldn't be very demonic of them, though.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't be very chaotic.
Yeah.
So you guys might not know, that's my real life mom right there. She's here every week. Hi, Mom, I love you. But she's referencing my character, Yig. He wasn't a barbarian. He was a fighter, but he was from sort of a barbarianist culture. Okay. And he was Yig, son of Tam, and his father, Tam, was super famous among the tribes. So, like, even though he left his homeland, he just assumed everyone knew who his dad was. So I am Yig, son of Tam. You've heard of him. Okay, so it is 7 p.m. on the East Coast, 6 p.m. here in Texas. I'm not sure what time it is in all your places, but
4.
Yeah, it is time for us to do the mid-roll. Now, it's a little bit easier this week than usual because my guests really don't have stuff to plug. A little bit. Emily, I know you're just now starting to do some stuff with Buck Lee.
I am.
Go ahead and talk about that real quick.
Sure. I have recently joined the Isle of Faces podcast. I joined on episode 100, so the centennial was kind of a big celebration. I came aboard. I'm not on every episode. It's hard to coordinate with someone who is on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. But I've joined we're doing a series, 100 Questions on the Winds of Winter, where we just kind of sit like this, but in podcast format, where we just riff on questions that we've gotten from our listeners about, what we think is going to happen, or what are we excited about? The questions range far and wide. So we've got one episode out. Another one should be out by Tuesday of this upcoming week. And yeah, beyond that, he has joined History of Westeros doing a reread of the whole series. They're on the Winds of Winter sample chapters right now. So if you're following Valar Reread Us over at History of Westeros, you could also listen to Sir Buckley talk about it on Isle of Faces. And I got one more thing to plug too, actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm actually a play tester / kind of like behind the scenes helper for a new Twitch stream called D&D&D, which stands for Dungeons and Dragons and Drawing, run by Dungeon Master and Marvel comic book artist Tana Ford, where she plays Dungeons and Dragons with 3 other Marvel comic book artists. So I'm my character is an NPC. I've helped her, do a little bit of the world building on our shared practice games on Radio Westeros server, and have run a few background one-shots to help each of those characters develop their backstory and kind of get a feel for playing, as some of them haven't really played much D&D before. So I'm not on there myself, but I want to plug it because I've had a lot of fun being involved.
Hey man, talk about your friends' stuff too. We do it all the time.
Yeah.
D&D on Twitch.
Yes, I will link it in the chat.
Please do. I'm going to have to give you a wrench real quick. So just say something in the chat real quick. I'll wrench you up, and then you'll be able to drop that in there. John, Patrick, either of you have something you want to plug? Friends, you making anything coming up?
No.
If you want to check out all of our old episodes, I believe that some of Playing Rough is still hosted, so you can check that out by searching anywhere you can find good podcasts. We stopped around episode 111 or 112, so there's a lot of back content. We covered tabletop and board games mostly, but we delved into video games occasionally. We talked about design, about approaching games from a casual competitive point of view, wherein I mostly took the casual side and my co-host mostly took the competitive side. And we also talked about some of the social issues around games and the messages that get baked into games when they are, say, focused on colonization or something like that. So lots of different things to talk about there. But we are not currently in production, so you won't be seeing any more content from there anytime soon.
Okay. Well, fingers crossed that you can get back to doing something like that, because tabletop gaming is right up my alley. I mean, I love D&D, but I also love Seven Wonders, Munchkin, Small World. You can keep it. Actually, I'll play Monopoly with you if we play exactly by the rules.
We covered the first 3. We never covered Monopoly, and we actually did do several actual plays, a couple of D&D one-shots, a couple of other systems, but we loved it. The Playing Rough Plays series is buried down the line a bit.
Cool. Yeah. Patrick, what about you?
Like I said again, I'm not a content creator. I have nothing to look up. If you want to hear me bitch about people's opinions on Star Wars movies I don't like, watch me on Twitter.
Yeah, you're a good Twitter follow, Patrick. You are a good Twitter follow. You're not super active, but your stuff is usually pretty worth reading.
Seconded.
All right. Well, this is also the part of the show where I remember to feed the YouTube algorithm and say oh yeah, subscribe, all that stuff, please. If you haven't, I'd appreciate it. We are on a march to 1,000 subscribers. We're getting close to 700. every content creator wants to grow somewhat, but I like 1,000 was my goal when I started the channel. Let's get there. Let's go. We also have patrons. And I'm going to say, as I do every week, love you guys. You are the ones that keep the lights on. You are the one that's paid for the streaming software and, cameras and green screen and all that stuff. So thank you very much. Our Patreon High Council consists of Lord John Bronsteen the Wise. You might know him as Bronte. Sixto Sounds, a.k.a. JP the Axe Grinder. And this lovely human being, ridiculous Ed Tollett, our alpha patron. Been with us since the very beginning. Love you, Sean. Drive home safe from work. I know you're getting off work right about now. Oh, yeah, literally right here. Finally out of work. And they are supported by the lords and ladies of the realm, including Lady Leaf Underhill, who is in the chat. Aemy Blackfyre, lover of poles. Ryan Stavka, the Russian Quartermaster, who is the aforementioned Patrick, my first ever dungeon master. And Reflective Rambling, who I haven't seen today, but you should follow Reflective Rambling on Twitter as well. She is such a lovely person. And her art is fantastic as well. She's done quite a few things of fan art for the channel, actually, and I love it. And come back next week. We're going to be doing a retro review. This is something we do every once in a while. We pick an old movie that us nerds loved when we were kids, or just, younger. Basically, if it's 20 years older, it counts. But we're having back special guest Christine from the Never Never podcast, a Dresden Files focused podcast, to talk about the classic The Never Ending Story. And John and Nessie, my regular co-hosts, will be back next week for that. But yeah, so you've got to know Potter, not Howard the Duck. But yeah, you've got a whole week to watch The Never Ending Story and then come back while we talk about if it held up from our childhood.
Problem is, no one's ever finished it.
Right. Still going. Yeah, so I think that's it for the mid-roll. I see Emily posting. Okay, there's the Twitch link. I'm going to grab my phone and go and like, whatever you call it. Oh, like, follow it. There you go. Nope, I don't hear you, Emily. I don't hear you right now.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself because my dogs are making some noise. Yeah, it's Will Slinny. So twitch.tv/Will Slinny. He's one of the players. I should be able to find it just through that. Hopefully you can see the link up there a little ways up.
Anyway, we're nerds, apparently.
It's so fun seeing them draw. Like, I mean, I love D&D in all forms. Obviously, I'm here talking about it, but it's cool to see them drawing their characters or sketching out little scenes that they're in the middle of as they play. Like, I do that. But I'm not very good at it. So it's nice to see people who have talent.
I don't do that because I'm worse at it than you are.
So back when we could meet in, person, what I used to do was try to cook something out of my worlds. So if there were some kind of, I don't know, steak or something that they were eating or a bread or something, I would try to come up with a seasoned bread that would fit into my world. Have y'all done anything like that for immersion's sake other than drawing?
Yeah, I've done that before. And I think I'm actually having my first in-person session in like 15 months in about 2 weeks. We're all vaccinated. We're so excited we can finally get together again. And my sister sent me the Heroes Feast, the D&D official cookbook. So I've been perusing through that, trying to pick out some things that are, fitting for the session that they'll be running, which is trying to besiege a vampire in her lair. Yeah, so it should be a good time. We've had some dress up sessions before. Like every Halloween, we encourage people to dress up. And like, I'm a huge theater nerd. This closet you've see behind me over here is full of wigs. I'm a wig designer too, so I love that element. And every once in a while, I'll kind of dress up, or at least wear the colors of the prominent NPC that I'm playing that day or something.
The DM of our current game of Stephen, Patrick, and I's is a huge fan of the dress up type things, and we haven't done it for D&D yet, mostly because the people we play with are all over the world. But I did play a game of Arkham Horror, the board game, at his house, where everyone was asked to dress up as their character, and we all ate 1920s food, including the centerpiece, one of those horrible gelatin salads that had like tuna in it that they used to eat a lot in the 1920s. Everyone tried a little, no one tried a lot.
Yikes. Yeah.
I don't even like fruit flavored jello. I can't imagine meat flavored jello.
Imagine no further.
Right. Sorry, I'm trying like Twitch not being helpful right now.
I'll link you later. I'll send you the link.
No, I think I've almost got it. I just don't ever really watch Twitch.
Sasuke, I am a type 1 diabetic.
But I can set it aside for now. I've got the link. Cool. All right. So exactly, Potter. Exactly. Evan Boggs plays the Tabaxi Druid in your campaign.
Yeah.
So excited to be playing in person again. Me too. I would love to play in person again. Of course, like the game that I'm playing in with John and Patrick, that crew started as an online crew well before quarantine. So when quarantine came around, I was already like, this old hat for me. But yeah, I would love to sit around the table, roll dice, eat a slice of pizza, But to answer your question, no, I don't do the. I don't. That's not where my skill lies. My skill lies in making interesting characters, in describing scenes in an interesting way. Now, I have done things like put on tavern noise in the background, or like thunder rain noises. I've given players goosebumps because I've turned down the lights and played rain music and started, in a whispery voice describing a really creepy scene. And as everybody like kind of went there together, they got, it was meant to be a horror type encounter, and it worked.
Yeah, I just wish I had like people and real life friends who I could play with. Like, I don't really have people in my area I know who would sit down. I'll get together in a group like that.
I will say this too, because this is something that a lot of us have dealt with, I'm sure, over the years. Can't find a group. You gotta go check your local comic book shop, and you gotta like ask the guy or girl behind the counter, is there a pegboard? Is there a bulletin board where I can just say, I want to play, and leave my phone number? Because like that is still, as far as I know, even in this digital age, the best way to find a local group. Now, I'm sure there's Facebook groups and stuff like that, but like people go to those stores to get dice, to get new rule books when they come out. And let's be honest, we're D&D nerds. We read the comic books too. We play Magic the Gathering. We go in there to buy our Superman beanie, So that is your best bet, is to check your local comic book shop. Now, I live in the Dallas area, so I'm kind of spoiled for choice. I'm not going to run out of people around me anytime soon. Not everybody lives.
My town even has a comic book shop in it.
Yeah, you might have to go to the next town over.
Yeah, I'd have to go to Tacoma to find one of those.
Right. But that is still the best way, because even in Tacoma, if that's the closest one to where you live, that means everybody that lives near you goes to Tacoma to get their D&D stuff anyway. So,
and if that doesn't work, the internet works too. I mean, I think like a lot of people have had to do that, or if you're not in the US and your lockdown is going to be a bit longer, I think certainly get out there. I mean, I love my in-person group. We've been playing, like I said, for 8 years now, and they're my OG crew. But I've met some incredible D&D players playing online, and like want to keep playing with them for as long as I possibly can. So, sometimes it's just about trying new things. Yeah, exactly what she's saying in the chat there. Roll20 is your friend. There's always looking for group stuff out there.
Yeah,
I don't know how to change names. Yes, it is true that D&D makes you worship the devil.
Yes, it does. I have summoned demons into my bedroom. But yeah, like Potter is saying, he lives a long way. But Potter is one of the people that plays in my group. He lives in Ireland. Jolie plays in another one of my groups. She's in the Netherlands. Emma plays in one of my games. She lives in England. So like, it's not always easy to find a time that works for everyone. That can be a challenge, especially when you start going international. But it's certainly not the barrier that it used to be. So there's still two things that I want to make sure I talk about. Actually, there's three things. The first one is going to be easy. Who plays Magic the Gathering here as well?
Me.
Okay. Do you know that there is a Forgotten Realms themed set coming out in July?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So Dritz de Werden, Tiamat, Vorpal Sword, Portable Hole, all of these will be Magic the Gathering cards very soon. And for me, the hype is very real.
The art. I can't wait to see the art. See how they interpret the characters. And right?
They've shown some of it on Twitter, and it looks fantastic. I mean, it shouldn't surprise you. Wizards of the Coast doesn't hire half-ass artists.
That's right.
Look at a D&D book, look at a Magic card. So yeah, for those of you that didn't know that, there is I think it's called Adventures in the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah.
So it will be a bunch of Forgotten Realms specific stuff, but like, I wouldn't be surprised to see Elminster in there as a planeswalker. I've seen the Tiamat card, and it's boss. It's awesome. Anyway, I digress. Just wanted to drop that little nugget. It's the first time Dungeons and Dragons has appeared in Magic the Gathering, but it is not the first time.
There was that promo card, the Sword of Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay, but that was an uncard. It was not.
Yeah.
Okay, but you're right. It was referenced in one like not legally playable card. But the reverse is not true, because there is an entire supplement for 5th edition set in Theros, which is from Magic the Gathering. So
and
you can
Ravnica too.
Oh, there is Ravnica. So it's been done twice the other direction. Anyway, when you own both properties, getting a crossover is pretty easy. Okay, so this is something that is near and dear to my heart, because I think this game is for everyone. All right, like, okay, there are people who should not play Dungeons and Dragons, but the list is pretty specific. First, if you are antisocial to the point that you just don't want to be around people, maybe you shouldn't play D&D, and that is some people. If you are a person who has difficulty for whatever, because of mental or emotional distress, cannot distinguish reality from fantasy, you probably shouldn't be playing. But for the 99.9% of the rest of the world, it is a perfectly acceptable thing to play. A lot of people come to the game and they're intimidated by not knowing all the rules yet, or like, I say, I've been playing for 37 years, and people are like, oh my God, I can't hold a candle when I'm too intimidated to play with you because you've been playing longer than I've been alive. I'm like, no, you're fine.
Yeah,
so,
in fact, you don't have to know the rules. All you have to know is what rules your character has to follow.
Yep,
and
exactly.
Honestly, with a good DM who knows you're new, you really don't even need that.
Yeah, you just get helped along.
Right.
I usually just tell my new players, tell me what you want to do. I will tell you how much of that is possible in your turn and help you.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
The barrier to entry being so low is so important. The last game group I started was at my work, and this was before pandemic. A lot of people who had never played before joined us and wanted to sit in on a couple of sessions, and I said, you do whatever you want. You can tell me I want to cast a spell, and we'll figure it out. You can tell me I want to research. We were actually playing Call of Cthulhu, not D&D, but I want to research this monster standing in front of me. What do I do? And we'll figure it out. But you just need to tell me what you want your character to do. And they were able to do it. It was great.
You will not find a version of D&D more new player friendly than 5th edition, too.
Right.
Yeah.
It is pretty easy to pick up. I appreciate that. But I bring this up specifically because I want to talk about gatekeeping in the hobby. Mm-hmm. I was never gate kept. Okay. First of all, straight white man. So I've got it as easy as it comes in America. Let's be honest. And I have no illusions about that. I have probably been guilty of being somewhat of a gatekeeper in the past, although I would slap young me stupid for doing it these days, but you learn, you grow. Did any of you ever experience gatekeeping at any point, early, later? I mean, I would suspect if anybody did, it was Emily, just because it's such a male-dominated hobby. Tradition.
It is. I didn't, but I think it's because of the group that I started with. I mean, Evan, who's in the chat, I've been playing with him since day one. And everyone that we play with are good friends. We'd been friends for 5-6 years before we started playing together. So no, I was really lucky there. And they're still my core group. Since then, I have brought a lot more of our friends into the hobby. And when you're in that role of facilitating, of course, by that nature, you're not being gate kept. But I think, hopefully oh gosh, yeah, this chat here. So, hopefully I'm bringing more people in who maybe didn't experience it before. Like so many of my female friends are like, oh no, I never thought I could play. That's like a nerdy guy thing. And I'm like, well, that's not true. I think I'm probably more obsessed with D&D than any of my guy friends. And let's try it out. And I had another friend of mine who's, her husband plays, and she tried to play with him and didn't have a great experience. And I talked to her about, what do you want to get out of the game? And she's a huge fan of the comic book series, The Rat Queens. If you haven't checked that out, I strongly recommend it. It's an all female D&D type adventuring party. So I created a mini campaign where everyone could play as a Rat Queen's main character, and it was women only, and we had a great time. And several of them, were like, well, that was fun, but it's not something I want to do long term. But 2 of them started playing kind of outside of that on their own. And I think it's one of those hobbies where it's so versatile. If you're running a really specific table, gatekeeping is definitely something that can come up. But if you're willing to kind of adapt the table to the players, then hopefully that won't happen.
Yeah, I've never run into I've never personally run into a gatekeeping type of player before. I mean you hear I like to read those Reddit horror stories where you just Jesus moly, how has this person ever found a group of people to play with who would put up with him for more than 5 minutes, yeah, I'd like to think if I were the DM at a table and there was a female player and one of my players told her no, this game isn't for you, I'd tell them, no, I don't think this game is for you, actually.
Yeah.
I do have a female player in my current campaign.
I mean, the game we play in doesn't have any women, but that's just down to who responded to the tweet.
Yeah.
But both of my other games where I'm the dungeon master right now have at least 2 women in each of them, and they're not the same women in either one,
Yeah, the first group that I ever played with long term was a high school group of mine that ultimately turned out to be not gatekeeping at all, but really more of a way for people to explore their own identities. One person had real difficulty with social interactions and used our time together as a way to sort of model social interactions and learn to work their way through some of their own anxieties. Another person was, at the time, was identifying as male, but has since come to understand that they're not. And so it's that was a really important, I think, cycle for them because they were exploring their gender and learning to understand who they really were.
John H. says, maybe it's just me, but the game seems to be just exploding with all the types of folks these past 5 years, especially. I mean, it is especially these past 5 years. 5th edition came out 6 years ago.
2014, I think.
Yeah, I want to say 2014, so 7 years ago. And it took a little while for it to gain the traction. But
I think it's all the streaming shows that made it so
and
popular.
you know, again, things like Critical Role, the things like Roll20, where it became so much easier to play away from the kitchen table. Like and the thing is, most of us never stopped playing. We're just not underground anymore. And then we started reaching out to all these other people and wanting them to join us. And you know, as far as the gatekeeping aspect of it goes, I know it still happens, although I also feel like the community has grown to the point where the people who are gatekeeping are the people who are like me, who this was their escape when they were young, and now all of a sudden my place that I used to escape is filled with all these people that I don't recognize, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of the people who would gatekeep for the edition don't play for the edition. Like, the only real D&D is 2nd edition.
Yeah.
Cool. Enjoy that.
Yeah, play 2nd edition by all means. If you're having fun, you're doing it right. But Stranger Things, Never podcast and just Stranger Things being a big factor. The thing is, D&D, the popularity was already growing, but like the fact that it's included in Stranger Things, in Community, in Freaks and Geeks, you know, all of these shows feature Dungeons and Dragons in some way. Oh yeah, Sasuke literally brought up Freaks and Geeks right as I was saying it. Like that shows you the rise, and it's because you're not summoning demons, you're not doing the devil's work. It's improv with math. I heard it described recently, and it's still like it's the best way I've ever heard it put.
Yeah, 30 years ago, D&D was portrayed in the media by people who didn't know what it was, but I knew their kids liked it, but they thought it was weird. Whereas now it's being
cover
portrayed
art
by
looks scary.
Yeah, they're scared of it.
Now it's being portrayed in the media by people who grew up playing it.
Right.
Yeah, I think honestly, like rather than gatekeeping, I've more gotten criticism from people who've never experienced it and who, you know, have ideas about what D&D is. Maybe not the satanic panic type, but you know, my little sister was like, "Oh, you're such a nerd, D&D, like that's a nerd thing," you know, and I was like, "Play one game with me and we'll see what you think." And now she and her husband play together all the time on the other side of the country. But
one of the most popular movies in the world right now, nerd stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this is kind of related to the topic of gatekeeping, but how do you guys, how do you all find your groups when you have a particular vision for like a feeling at the table or something? So one time I ran a one shot where it was intended to be very melancholy, and I didn't want people to join necessarily the group who were going to use it as a murder hobo thing. And so I just talked to my regulars at that point, and they wanted to play a melancholy game, and so we just sort of jumped right into that. But do you ever find yourself wishing for a particular emotional beat or something, or trying to create one and trying to figure out who to place in the group?
I mean, the short answer to that is yes. Mm-hmm. I do. But you answered half of the question yourself, in that having that conversation before you start putting pencil to paper is huge in making that happen. Like, not gonna lie, in our current game, I find the tone to be a little inconsistent, but it's because we all created our characters in a vacuum.
Right.
We did not do a session 0 for that campaign.
My character is very over the top.
Very over the top.
Yeah.
Like, it's fun to watch you do, but like your character and Kurt's character are kind of similar, and then John, your character and my character kind of similar, right. But like there is a little bit of a disconnect between the two feels of those two sides. But we're still making it work. We're still having fun, so we're doing it right.
I think in Kurt's game, all our characters, even though we all created them in a vacuum too, like we didn't just set out and say, "Oh, all our characters are going to be amoral, awful, sadistic, selfish," but they just ended up there like on their own, and they just mesh so well because none of these. It's just 4 people who don't give a crap about anything.
Right.
Oh, Beth, at the time I was in the middle of filming or recording Playing Rough. I had a co-host. We had a group of people who were part of the community. We had friends from high school that were still in there. So we had regulars only in the sense that we had people that we had still been playing with for the last 10 years.
Right. But like having that conversation ahead of time, and I've done it. I've gone to like before, like Patrick, when we started our way back when, I said, this campaign's going to have like a dark edge to it. Mm-hmm. It's going to have, some of my favorite writers will kill off people because, after you get to know them and love them, they'll kill that NPC to make it hurt.
One of my players is on his third PC.
Well, and that happens too.
I have such a mixed answer to this because I think, my main group, it's more about the friendships, that I have along the way. And so, we invited 2 brand new players in this time. And that certainly was a challenge to the tone and to getting kind of the story off the ground. But I didn't mind doing it. And I think, we've had some of our best sessions ever in the last couple of weeks because, a year in, it's really clicking and they've connected with that character. And we also did have a pretty comprehensive session 0. And then we had kind of a check-in point about a year in where I had one-on-one meetings with each person. And do you like your character? Are you getting things out of it? Do you want to talk about your backstory? But I did kind of set the tone of like, I love A Song of Ice and Fire. Like I want kind of a little bit of political intrigue. It's not just going to be murder hobo. And, some of my players like the fighting a little bit more. And so it's a little bit of a give and take to keep everyone happy. But, the one shots and things that I've run where I have a really specific vision, like then I do try to cherry pick the players that I have. So, yeah.
So I want to just raise, because I think this is the perfect point to segue into this. The question I've had ever since Stephen was talking about superhuman or supernatural characters who are, big, larger than life characters. Do you all find sometimes the mechanics of the game do run a little counter to the kind of games that you want to run? And the biggest thing I'm thinking of here is assassinations, because I would love to play a Song of Ice and Fire inspired game with politics, but I also would like to be able to poison the king if I need to. And in, standard rules as written D&D, he might lose 2 constitution points for the next 2 hours and then have me executed. So I'm kind of curious when you find that the story has to be a little awkwardly shoehorned in.
I have such an answer for this because I just pulled off a massive assassination, but you go ahead, Stephen. Sorry.
I have 2 answers for this, actually. One, they both require a lot of work, but one is to homebrew the crap out of your rules so that like nobody here is over 4th level. Sure. And poisons are deadlier, just because you made your Constitution saving throw, that just like that puts it off for you got to roll again and again and again, So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to don't play D&D, play GURPS.
Yeah.
Or
there's other games out there for that kind of thing.
Play some other system that has a rule set that is geared towards the reality level of play. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of GURPS, Generic Universal Role-Playing System. It's a little bit burdensome. It's a little bit like rules heavy, but it does try to simulate reality in a way that Dungeons & Dragons just can't.
Yeah. It's like, if you want to play a game of Mario, don't put in Halo,
Mm-hmm.
How did you do it, Emma?
Well, mine, I'm just coming at it from a DM, so obviously you have a lot more control over the situation. Like my players weren't assassinating anyone, but they were nearby when it happened. They took an airship with a bunch of dignitaries. They and some from one kingdom were dropped off there. The airship takes off and basically Hindenburgs and explodes about a quarter mile away from them. in what was very clearly a targeted strike. And some of my players are here in the chat, so I won't give too much away, but it certainly was an assassination. They know that. They don't exactly know who was at play, but I didn't like roll damage to see how quickly the fire caught or anything. I just kind of ran, I that was a important plot point enough to the point where it's happening. There's some stuff that they could react to. They actually did save a few people because I did a lot of research on that to figure out would they be able to get there and would they be able to, save anyone. But, the people I wanted to died because that's exactly where I put the bomb,
Right?
So,
Yeah.
But we've got a couple of good questions in the chat I'm going to pop up. And anybody else who has a question for us, we have less than 30 minutes for the end of the stream, so get your questions in now. John H. asks, what percentage of your campaigns are pre-prepared in detail versus what percentage is improvised? So that's a kind of difficult question to answer for me, because you're is it an either or?
Yeah, no plan survives contact with the enemy.
You've got it. Like I go into most of my campaigns having some idea of where I want them to end, and then nudging the story this way and that as the characters stumble through the game world I've made for them. So I would say 0% are pre-prepared in detail, but there is some knowledge of where I want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to talk like micro and macro. It's like if I'm talking about the entire campaign, I've got ideas about what key long-term NPCs are going to be doing at a macro scale. And I have an idea of where certain things are going to go and certain arcs are going to go, but I don't have every little thing figured out because stuff that the players do or other NPCs do is going to affect that over time. At a micro level, when I'm prepping for one session, I've got my recap. I've got certainly what they're going to do immediately. And then if I know it's going to be all combat, I'll have the map and some ideas written out for that. But, this last session I ran on Friday, my players arrived at a town and they needed to do some reconnaissance. And then ultimately there was a vampire that they were trying to go execute. I didn't know what the plan was going to be. So I spent, a shorter session having them go get that recon and make a plan. And most of the time it was just them at the tavern talking and figuring it all out while I sat on mute and listened. The next session that I do is going to be tons of planning because now I know what time of day they're going in and, what the guard shifts would be and all of that, so it ebbs and flows a ton.
I just wanted to add that to my process, I know what I'm doing next week, usually. Like, I know what I'm doing next week, and I know where I kind of want it to end. But I won't know what I'm doing to the week after until we get through this week, because I don't know where we're going to be.
Yes.
Go ahead, Patrick. Sorry.
Yeah, basically, I treat each adventure like an episode of a TV show, where it's like there's a main meta plot going on. It might not have anything to do with what you're doing right now. That's kind of your choice. But yeah, they'll go to a town. I'll have an adventure set up for them. I know what's going on. Like just recently, I had a long mystery going. They're in a town that's cursed by these the three hags. The hags are members of the townsfolk that are disguised as humans, and the players had to figure out who the hags were. As every single night the hags kill another person.
Yeah.
I'm a serial over preparer of systems. I want to know if the PCs decide to shut down the local mine, where the ore isn't going, and therefore what industries are impacted, and that sort of thing. I prepare huge at the macro level. I love thinking about the power players in the kingdom and all of that stuff and writing it all down ahead of time. As far as what happens in the next session, much less preparation because people go such different directions than you're expecting. I do try to have a few things on hand, whether it be like likely monsters they'll run into. And there's an old joke about like, what does the castle up on the hill look like? Well, it's whatever the last castle I drew looks like. I'll have something prepared for the castle, but it might not be quite what they had in mind because that's what I've got on hand. Or I'll just make it up as I go along if I need to.
Yeah, with me, the easy way to tell if I pre-planned it or made it up, if it's serious, I pre-planned it. If it's silly, I made it up on the spot. So if a character comes in, please, heroes, I request your help. I made him up beforehand. If his name is Benvolio Ravioli and he hits on you, I made him up on the spot because I needed a bartender.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm with you.
That is an actual character in my campaign, by the way.
But John, you said something that really resonated with me about like if this mine is shut down. I understand the geopolitical ramifications of that choice.
Who does it make mad? Who does it make happy that the ore isn't flowing anymore? Those sorts of things are what I want to know before they do anything. If
you're playing in my established game world, yes, I have that same thing. I have NPCs and they're doing their thing. They're off. Their schemes are going on regardless of what the player characters in the story are doing. So I definitely do that.
That's critical. You can't, I mean, your players are important and they're impacting the world, but they're not impacting every single thing that every single person is doing. And sometimes they aren't aware of some of the things, you know, like my players, you know, they know about one potential, you know, enemy of theirs, but they don't know who his allies are or what they're doing. And, you know, sometimes those people are quite a few steps ahead of the players at certain beats of the campaign.
One of the times I was most proud of my work as a DM was when the party stopped everything they were doing to debate whether or not the big bad evil guy was actually the hero and that they should follow him. And they ended up picking the right person to back, but I had made both the evil and the good side. It was like an intrigue and like intelligence gathering based campaign, and they didn't know who to trust. And they were like, well, this person has connections to the criminal underworld. Like, should we really trust her? Yes, you should trust her because the government is out to get you. But it was a great stalled session where they had to sit and think like, wait a minute, what do we want to accomplish?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Recently, the night before the session, I asked all my players, what is something that your character would trade their soul for?
Yeah.
And you know, the one who gave me the most interesting answer, I had her transported to a demon's realm in the abyss, and he offered it to her. And in return, she doesn't have to give her own soul. She has to give this. She has to give him the soul of the celestial elf NPC that they've been friends with for years.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
yeah. And she had a legitimately hard time deciding. And
that's good. That's good storytelling. I'm not trying to really cut you off, but I'm noticing we've got quite a few questions in the chat.
Yeah.
So I want to just make sure we get to them all.
Okay.
You know, there's some really good ones. But
Okay.
Patrick, I'll throw it back to you for this one first. How do you prefer to handle player character deaths? Do you improvise a side quest to get them back, or just make the player?
I've had quite a few deaths in my game, so I can answer both ways. It depends on the circumstances. One guy just died out in the woods to a bear. There's no high-level magic uses around. Unless they decide to go on a quest to bring him back, he's gone and dead. He rolled up a new character. Just a new guy showed up saying, hey, I'm an investigator in the area. Hey, I'll join up with you. You know, and that's actually the second. His first character, boom, got shot and killed by the town guard while trying to escape jail. The rest of the party had to run, leave his body behind. They never got back to him. They're only like level 4 at the time. So he was dead. So they go to a fighting pit, see this badass monk beating people up, say, hey, that guy should join our party. And that's how his new character came into the group. Alternatively, I had the rogue in my party. He died, but they had access to a wealthy benefactor who was able to. They were friends with this noblewoman who married who's married to this guy who's super.
So
super
you're
rich.
Patrick. Your short answer is.
I'll spare you the story, but
yeah,
basically the guy offered to bring him back in exchange for. Well, now you got to do whatever I want you to do from now on.
But like they already had, like you did not create a situation for them to save. They came up with that plan on their own. And I'm actually going to agree with you. I would handle it more or less the same way. I want character death to mean something. If it's too easy to bring your character back, players get reckless with their characters.
Yeah. We had our characters recently got a helm of teleportation, and they decided they wanted to teleport around and do some errands with it. And some of them have pets. One of them has a pet squirrel. Another one has a pet dog. Well, they had a horrible mishap with their teleportation. Squirrels have like 1 hit point. Dogs have like 6 hit points. They, knocked down immediately, dying, and they had to expend a ton of high level magic to save a freaking squirrel, but it was their choice,
Right.
Yeah. Well, in Steve's games, you die in the game, you die in real life.
Yeah, I come to your house and kill you.
Player death, character death, they're all the same. One thing I also do though is I'll talk to my players outside of the game. I'll do a little OOC conversation, and I'll be like, what do you have planned for this character? How much is it important that you save this person? And I've had a lot of players be like, no, let's move on to the next one. And I one time had one person who had really expended a lot of out-of-game resources to immerse themselves, art and crafts and things like that, and decided it's better that we find a way to bring this person back than let you lose this character you've invested so much in.
I mean, I'm with you, but there's no right or wrong answer. But I think that's why we're being asked, how do we handle it? In general, if you die, you're dead. In general, in my games, that the magic that's in D&D to bring you back. If you read the description, it's 25,000 gold pieces worth of components, which for those of you uninitiated, entire parties of 10th level characters don't have 25,000 gold pieces between them a lot of the time. Jolie. No, sorry. Do you have something else to add to it?
And like a 3.5, like the basic raise dead spell, you come back a level lower than you were before. Like you come back weaker.
There are penalties. Oh yeah. Yep.
They hit you where players care about their characters.
Right. Jolie's got a really great question. So she's about to start running her first ever game, which I will be playing in as a Warforged Life Domain Cleric. It's going to be fun. But do we have any tips for new DMs? Now, you've probably gotten all my tips, but the one tip I always tell to every DM is let the players drive it as much as they can. Let the players determine where things are going as much as they're willing. If they're not, that's when you start dragging them along. But if you can get one player to say, I want to go do this, then all you have to do is react to that.
Yeah.
My advice is if you wait until you think you're prepared enough to start, you're never going to start.
There's a reason.
You're going to have to take a plunge off that diving board at some point. It's going to be scary.
Yeah, everyone was new when they started DMing, and everyone who started DMing felt like they weren't ready. And to some degree, you're not going to be ready for every single situation because so much of it is entirely improv. But you're playing with your friends, right? I mean, hopefully, no one's expecting perfection.
If your friends are new players, they're not even going to notice.
They don't know.
Yeah, because they're worried about screwing up themselves.
I actually really liked having. I had like 2 veteran players when I started DMing the first time. And that was helpful for me because I didn't have to be the rules lawyer, adjudicator, judge the entire time. I could kind of lean on them to know that they knew how to play their character or maybe answer a side question really quick so that I could keep focusing on keeping the game moving. And then I think the other thing, and I already told you this, and I think you already took this advice, Julie, but is maybe don't try to homebrew the first thing that you run. It's okay to not have every single thing be your own unique creative thought. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And I think it helps you understand how to format an adventure or a session or what type of prep to do and what type of things to decide on the fly to see some official campaign materials that someone else who's done it before has created. So I think you're running Horde of the Dragon Queen, which is awesome. All the official D&D modules are really well written, but there's also tons of great little one-shots out there. My favorite one is called The Wild Sheep Chase. Takes one session. It's a level 3 to 4 adventure. If you haven't heard of it, I strongly recommend that you go run this for your friends as your first thing that you run, because it's easy, it's fun, it's whimsical, it's silly, and you really can't screw it up.
That's another thing that's really great about the game in general, is that if you know who your players are, you can make the game for them. Like, I introduced my children to role-playing games when they were young. My oldest daughter, Elora, by the way, she's going to be on the channel here in a couple of weeks. She's going to be on, but she's a dungeon master in her own right. She's never run a game for me, but like, you know, she's moved away and lives near to Austin, which is not super close to me. But you know, she's took her from fledgling D&D player, you know, all the way through. You know what? Tune in a couple of weeks, you'll hear all about it. But and her style is probably very different from mine. Okay, John, that's pretty harsh, my man. Like, here's the thing. Okay, question for these dungeon masters real quick. Steven's question. Characters are in a bad situation. They're fighting and they're having a rough go. Crit. You roll a critical hit that is going to kill the party member, but they wouldn't die if it's just a hit.
I like to roll in the open because it removes the ethical question from me.
My philosophy is, if you've already decided what the outcome is, why are you rolling the dice?
Fair enough.
You know, so if I roll the dice, I abide by the dice.
Emily, you're muted again.
Thank you. Sorry, I was typing and didn't wait. Yeah, I've fudged a roll before to save someone, and I regretted it later because I felt like it took away from the story. I think the only time I did it, it was like a brand new person who spent a ton of time on their character, was very invested in that character, and I thought maybe they would walk away from the game if it happened, but I still a little bit regret it. And I you know, moving forward now, I mean, I took out arguably one of my favorite PCs in my game yesterday, because he decided to intimidate a dragon by himself while he had 10 hit points left. And then I rolled a 6 on my ability to recharge my breath weapon and roasted him. But before he failed all his death saves, someone did come bring him back. But yeah, I mean, he was down and dying for sure. And I don't regret
it. Word of advice about, sorry, Steven.
Just take this out of context as much as you want. I killed my little brother 3 weeks ago. And it was that exact situation. Like, it was the nat 20 that for the crit that actually killed him. There was no way I was going to roll enough damage to. I mean, I was going to put him down, but you know, he would have been negative death saves. But you know, I got him all the way to full negative hit points, and you know, but I also knew he wasn't super attached to his character. He's played before. We've played together for years. But I also understand, Emily, because I think you actually hit the nail on the head. Brand new player, put a lot of time and effort into crafting this character, and one bad die roll could ruin the experience of the entire game for them. I'm with you.
Yeah. You know, I had a few weeks later after that happened, and one of my other new players, they were fighting a slod, and he got killed and turned into a slod, because that's what happens when you fight slods. And I let it happen, and I knew he put a ton into it. I'm sorry, Theron. But again, they had this wand of wish, and you know, the party decided it was worth it to use that on that. Now that could have been that we don't have a wizard in the party. No one was going to ever get access to the wish spell. It had 2 charges, and the fighter both times used it on things that happened pretty early game that arguably they could have made a lot more use out of that wand if they had saved it for more pivotal situations. But
pivotal is a great word. We'll go with
pivotable. Yeah, exactly. I make stuff up all the time. I'm a DM.
No, word of advice
That's
to any DM: if you do fudge dice rolls, never, ever, ever let your players know you fudge the die, because it's one thing to keep your player alive. It's another thing to let them know that there's no tension now.
Tish has a great question here, by the way. And Tish, if I'm not mistaken, aren't you about to start playing for the first time soon? So disagreements in games are rare. They have happened. And honestly, a lot of times it's down to people who are overly invested in their characters, and that comes to being at odds with either another character in the story or a story beat that the Dungeon Master has planned. Okay, so the Dungeon Master is the god of this universe. They have the ultimate final say. But like, there are rules to being a good human that you should still be following while you're being a Dungeon Master, like understanding that just because you have the final say, but your job is still to steer the fun ship.
Yeah, you're an authority in the game, but in real life, you're still just their friend. You're not their actual boss.
Yeah. I think it depends on whether the disagreement's happening as characters or as players. As characters, I stay out of it. I stay out of it.
Right. If John's character and Patrick's character are having an argument, I've got nothing. They are in charge of everything to do with John's character and Patrick's character.
And me and you, Cassandra and Haran, hated each other, but the two of us thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, we had like the last game we played. Our characters, I bought deadly poison. I spent a huge amount of gold and bought poison to kill his character with, just in case. But we were laughing about it the whole time
because I called her the help.
Yeah.
Oh.
But there was never bad blood between he and I.
No, yeah, I have had that in a game before. I mean, we, Evan and Alicia, who are in the chat here, we had a player in our group who is still one of my best friends in the world. But after like a year of him, canceling an hour before the game after we had all rearranged our schedules, or, making choices with his character that, like were very much like it's what my character would do, even though it made the game less fun for everybody else. Basically I wasn't even the DM of this game, but I after he like ruined a day that I had fully rearranged for the third time, I was like, look, friend, I care about you. I don't want to have drama with you in real life, but if this isn't a priority for you, if you can't commit to something and be there, then either change that or we don't really want you in the game anymore. I'm sorry, but that's kind of the way it has to be. And the rest of the group basically agreed with that, and we parted ways. Still a great friend, have played D&D with him again since then several times. It didn't ruin my life to do that, but I think it's all about how you bring that conversation up.
That is one thing a lot of first-time players don't understand, is that everybody at the table is expecting everybody else at the table to be there. Like you are signing up for something where there's a social contract when you join a D&D group. There is. Now, like, people have lives and people have to pull out of games all the time. That's just how it is. And we as adults have to recognize that sometimes players come and go, and sometimes people have to rearrange for the last minute. But I'm also with you, third week in a row when that happens, I'm like, I'm sorry, we can still be friends, but you can't play in a game where I can't trust you to be there.
Yep, exactly. And I'll work with people too. Like we have one of our players, our fighter, his wife's expecting a baby in a month. And so I've already created a mechanic in the game so that when that happens, I can pull him out of there and let the party continue for a while until he's ready to rejoin. And, we'll keep up with what's going on with Finn through, text posts or something like that. But there's a way to do that. It's just all about communicating it ahead of time rather than letting it turn into drama and blow up in your face.
Yeah.
Right.
I think one thing you can do to head off a lot of disagreements is consistency. Treating people the same and treating them well when you can. Be brutal with their characters if you need to, but be brutal in the same way every time.
Treat the players fairly too. Don't like give one character all the attention and then just shun the other ones.
Which is not to say you can't have an adventure focused on a specific character, but the whole campaign should not be. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Like some of my characters in my long form campaign do have arcs, and a lot of it's because they wrote backstories that kind of I was able to pull from. Others, they're still figuring themselves out, or they just want to be a part of the team, and there's an opportunity for that later, or maybe they don't want that, but it's it's based on kind of the conversations that they have with me. And if you're putting a lot into it, I certainly will reward that, but I'm not going to punish other people for just wanting to show up and play.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Like some people are fine with being like the supporting character and letting one of the other players be like the main guy. But, generally people everybody wants to feel like they are the hero of the story, at least part of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, but you got to realize the story isn't about you. It's about the story isn't about Frodo. It's about the Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah, that's why I tend to have a meta plot, the main plot line, which is pretty much disconnected from all the characters' personal backstories. But then each one of them will have side quests that deal specifically with them.
Totally, I do that too.
Well, it's 8:00 on the East Coast. I've had about all I can stand of this for one day.
Can I just say one more thing? Jess, you said you weren't invested in your character yet. So
Jess has played one session. She's played one session ever this morning.
Yeah, you'll find who your character is. They'll become a real person the more you play them.
It usually takes a few sessions. But yeah, I always find myself growing more and more attached to characters the longer I play them.
And thanks for knowing your spells and what they do.
Yes, well, she's playing a wizard as her first ever character, and she's joining a party that's already 6th level, so 6th level wizard. She's jumping in the deep end, but we played today, and she got a lot of use out of Dispel Magic.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of use. Oh, Patrick, just in code, they're going after Harneas, the wizard in the foothills right now.
Okay.
Slightly different. It's playing out very differently than it did for you because they're kind of bad guys and you're kind of good guys when I put you through that adventure. But yeah.
How do they feel about Aurelius?
They hate him.
Good.
But they've been contracted to kill him later, so it's fine. Yeah. So I do want to again thank John and Emily and Patrick, all of you for joining me here today. I love this game. I love the concept of the tabletop RPG, of getting to live that hero life, of stepping out of the mundanity of the real world for a little while. And just thanks for coming on and sharing your stories with me. I'm going to be doing more D&D content in the future. I think my next one, I'm going to be having some of the newer players from my games come on to talk about, what it's been like for them so far. But one last chance, John, tell the people where to find you and talk about that thing you did.
Absolutely. So you can catch me at LKE2300 on Twitter, or you can look up some of the back content from my previous podcast, Playing Rough, available wherever podcasts are aggregated.
Okay, great. Patrick, you don't have anything, but you can follow an enemy spy on Twitter. An enemy spy.
All right.
Emily.
Yeah, for me, I'm on Twitter. I'm pretty new to Twitter, actually. I'm not a big internet person until recently, but at Emily of the Eerie on Twitter. You can find the podcast that I appear on occasionally called the Isle of Faces podcast on wherever you do podcasting. And if you really want to go deep into my nerd life, I also have an Instagram account for my wig and costuming, makeup stuff at EVL_wiglady. So I forgot I mentioned that earlier, that I dress up sometimes for D&D. So if that's of interest to you, I put some of that stuff on there.
Yeah, I love cosplay. I do. Have you seen my Lyanna Stark cosplay? It's fantastic.
Yeah.
No,
I have
Okay.
seen it. Yeah, no, definitely. No, my D&D cosplay, I've done Jester Lavore before, which is a very, very involved cosplay. So you can find that on my Instagram for sure.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
And like, again, links are down in the description, especially the Twitter links, because a lot of times Twitter is the easier way to like find other stuff from those people. Yeah, so go check it out below. Playing Rough, Isle of Faces, nothing in particular, just a good guy. And come back next week for some discussion of the never-ending story. And I'll leave you all with this joke. A rogue is wandering in the desert and he finds a magic lamp, and he rubs the lamp and the genie pops out, and the genie says, "You may have 3 wishes, but there are 3 things that you cannot wish for. First, I cannot make anyone fall in love with you. Second, I can't bring anyone back from the dead. And third, no wishing for more wishes. What is your wish, my master?" And the rogue thinks about it and he says, "I want to have my D&D group meet every week without fail." And the genie says, "There are 4 things you cannot wish for." All right, y'all. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Panelists, you were wonderful.
Thank you.
Chatters, you were also wonderful as always. Saw a few new faces. I think I got a new couple new subs today. So thank you guys so much. And yeah, we'll see y'all next week. And until next time, y'all know what that means. Peace and be excellent to each other.
Yeah.